You are listening to the Channeling Source podcast. May what's for the highest good to occur, occur. Hey, Brandon here, and you're listening to the Channeling Source podcast, episode 4. 6 things I've learned since starting a spiritual business and doing that full time, where I don't have a different day job. I'm just doing the spiritual business as my sole source of income. And when I was sitting with what topic to tackle, to channel on today, to talk about today, I guess, for this episode, this is the one that Source told me to focus on. So I sat with my spirit guides, the angels, and Source on these 6 topics as far as what to talk about, and these were some of the ones they really told me to focus on, and I'm sure a lot more is gonna not slip through in a bad way, but come through, I guess, while I'm talking about these, because there are so many little things that can make a big difference that will really percolate whenever I sit with this topic, or all these things I'd really like to talk about it, but some of it doesn't like totally fit in the 6 or so main, if you will, topics or themes that kind of came through. And this is something I know I could spend a ton of episodes on just with this kind of a topic. Like if I just did X number of things I learned from doing a spiritual business full time, I could probably come out with like 10, 15, 20 episodes before I started to run out of things to talk about, if that. So without too much further ado, I'm going to delve into just some of the areas they, again, guided me to focus on, and let's get started. And as usually happens for these episodes, there's one thing I'd like to get to before really getting into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of what came through and what I'm guided to talk about. And it's kind of a channeled message sort of thing. Pretty much I asked, like, are there any key things that would be for the highest good to be said before starting, the kind of meat and potatoes of the podcast episode? And they kind of had this channel message, and they're telling me I might have to paraphrase some of this, so bear with me if I need to explain any of it or anything like that. So here is what came through. And this is kind of geared towards if you're having an aspiration that has to do with starting a spiritual business. This could kind of veer off into other areas as well, like if you're aiming for a type of success or a dream or a target. So let's go here. If it's meant to happen, it will happen. Success, your purpose, a business endeavor taking off. It's a really good time to stop forcing things for this crowd, for most of you tuning in. It's a good time to start listening. It's a good time to start looking at what's working and what will work. So, if what I'm getting to say to explain that is if something starts working for you, even if it's not exactly the thing that you were aiming for, or exactly the way you expected it, or maybe even wanted it to look as far as like how to get to an end goal or end target or a dream fulfillment, pay attention to it if it starts working. There's a reason for that. And that could be the path that gets you there to that end result, or is like a not a skipping stone, but a stepping stone on the way to get there, even if it seems indirect or different than you expected. So if something starts working, it might be a good time they're showing me going all in, but really move towards that for you. So it's definitely not a time to just do what everyone else is doing, and it's definitely not a time to follow the crowd blindly, especially in today's day and age. This could go with any area or topic. However, there's so much misinformation flying around. There are so many people trying to sell themselves as the solution, whether it's a spiritual result, a business result, a marketing result, a money result. When they're not, they're just trying to get their dollar, I guess you could say, or get their fame or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with money or fame. I personally think integrity is huge, especially if you're trying to succeed long term with anything. I think being the real deal, being genuine and authentic, having legit experience, like all those are kind of things we're going to talk about. However, also having integrity is just so important if you'd like a lasting thing with a customer base that trusts you, or a following or an audience that trusts you. So there is what I'm hearing to say is there is a lot out there that isn't in integrity. Like, either people telling you to do things that they themselves don't do or haven't done, or I mean, if they get the intuitive message like, "Hey, this is gonna help this crowd," even if it's not something they personally do, that's different because that's intuitive advice coming through to help someone. But if it's like they're like, "Yeah, XYZ is what's gonna make your business blow up," but they actually have this other thing over here that's completely different, that's actually what's making them successful, and they know that, like, that's kind of like, selling something that's not quite, I guess you could say, ethical or of integrity, because they're kinda selling you the wrong formula and telling you it's gonna get the right results, so to speak. Maybe I didn't say that the best way, but the results you're looking to get. And another thing is a lot of people in the mainstream right now in certain arenas might not totally be coming from a place where they know what they're talking about to get the message across in a way you'll probably understand it. And you do have to use, well, what's the best thing for me to say here? Discernment is key, honestly. And of course, I'm always going to say intuition and your divine guidance, your awareness are going to be really big ways for you to discern with all that. I'm kind of getting off topic and in a direction they didn't want me to go with that last sentence, but I'll say that. I'm just going to continue reading because I think you kind of get the gist by now. So, if you are really a spiritual entrepreneur and you're really meant to stand out, you're going to be a pioneer. You're going to have to forge new ways. You're going to have to look at the context of today's landscape and look at what is going to work for you right now or in today's day and age, if you will. And you can probably apply that to the future too. You will probably have to listen to your intuition on this. It's difficult to force things to happen if it's not part of Spirit's plan for you. So be flexible and allow Spirit to work. So, another thing they're kind of adding in is, you're going to have to flow with, are you ready for the next step? Have you had all the learnings you need to really be effective in the next step? Like, Spirit's not going to throw you into anything you're not ready for, which is kind of the gist, at least in part, of what they were saying earlier. Like, it's difficult to force things to happen when it's not the right time for them. If you're not ready, if Spirit has a different path that's going to serve you and the world more, because of course, Spirit knows the best way. And I guess what I'm kind of getting out and getting to in so many words is there's probably an optimal way for you that's going to serve Spirit, the world, and you, and be really great for all parties involved for the highest good and be like win, win, win. What I'm getting for this crowd is like that's really what Spirit's trying to get you to, whether it looks like the original version of the physical manifestation of the dream you'd like, or that's going to be completely different, but give you everything you wanted anyways, but maybe just like it looks a bit different than you expected it would. So, really, I would be a little bit flexible with Spirit when it comes to creating your dream life and honing that in. I'd also really be trusting the timing of things and just really trust where you're at, which is kind of what the next part was talking about here, which is the last part for this thing that came through. Destiny plays a huge role regarding where you're at right now. It might not be where you want to be, but you have to trust it. And I know that is so hard to hear sometimes when we're not where we want to be or we seem so far away from our targets or our dreams and things like that. I really would trust it. That's what I'm getting to say here. And again, trust that if you're meant to get there, you will get there, even if it surprises you. And it's going to make sense in hindsight. So try not to be really mad at the universe right now if all your dreams didn't come true in 24 hours when you wrote things down, or you wanted to start a spiritual business and then the universe threw a bunch of things to learn at you, or a bunch of really interesting experiences to get you prepared to like deal with clients or certain things, or to get you through some of the things you need to go through to be in a place where you're effective with clients. Like, this isn't really something you can throw yourself into just for money. You can make money with it. Like that's part of it. Like you have to receive and be able to sustain yourself and your world and be in a good place for the people you're showing up for. So money kind of has to be a part of it unless you already have like a gigantic trust fund or all your finances are taken care of, which awesome. You could probably not worry too much about that. I guess the energy I'm trying to talk to is like sometimes it seems like I see people who are really desperate to make money and like leave a job or leave a situation, which I totally understand. And I get that. And they kind of see like spirituality or a spiritual business or a reading business as the way to that. And it might not be exactly that, and is like, is that always the best, like, sole reason to start something that's meant to be to help other people or to change the world for the better? No, not necessarily. And is that the best energy to come from when you're attempting to put a new energy out into the world or an energy that's supposed to be of service to people or the world? No, absolutely not. And I kind of feel like some of you might be pulling your hair out right now with the direction this is going. This isn't what you wanted when you tuned into this. I think it's entirely possible to make money with ease. And I think it's a great thing to ask for and manifest, and something that maybe everyone deserves, even in a certain sense. And at the same time, I don't think the best reason to start a spiritual business is for easy money, if that makes sense, or for quick money. Probably more the latter, the quick money part. Not that it doesn't happen to people if it's for the highest good and it's really meant to happen for them, and maybe a social media page takes off or something like that, and awesome, kudos. At the same time, I just really would say the energy you're approaching any business from, including a spiritual business, is probably part of the key and really key to it. Like, I mean, sometimes we have a dream that's just on our heart and on our soul, and it's difficult to explain. We just really feel called to do it and drawn to it. And I think that's a bit different than what I'm talking about here, where if you really dug into it and looked at it intuitively and were really honest with yourself, it's just like, what are the real reasons you're doing it? And I think that can be tough for a lot of people to answer, unfortunately. Though, if you are intuitive enough to check in on this, like check in on it. Like, what are you getting? Like, what are you getting? Is for the highest good for you to go this direction? Like, when you check in, are you getting like this is what would serve you in the world the most? Things like that. And really just be honest with yourself, and be honest with yourself if you're getting that this sort of direction is actually going to give you what you're looking for. I'm not trying to, and what would be for the highest good of the world. I'm not trying to dissuade you from it. I would say awareness is key. I'd like you to take the best path for you, whether it's this or something else or something completely unexpected. And that's part of why I'm saying all this, in addition to the fact that it just kind of came through to be said, I guess. So, pretty much the reason all that came through, all that we just kind of went through, is there are a fair number of you just like gunning for this, and you don't even know why you're doing it or if it's the best option. And you haven't really sat with that. And I totally understand, because the topic is really interesting. A lot of people really love it. It's a really a big jam for a lot of people. The way I'm getting to say it is I think a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons, and that doesn't really serve the clientele or the world as much as you think it does. So just double check your reasons. And I'm not trying to call you a bad person or wrong for any of it. I really would, again, just say awareness is key, and it's going to help you go down the right path. And one thing that they're kind of telling me to talk about, and it's been on my mind, and I promise we'll get to the 5 or 6 things like right after this, what this podcast episode is titled after. One of the things I'm getting to talk about is I've seen a lot of people on social media recently, and it's been a big thing that's kind of percolated, where they'll really be annoyed at the world maybe for the results, or they'll really call life really hard or say entrepreneurship's really hard or da 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 da. One, my first thought is like, is that really what you would like to be putting out into the world and like putting out there to the universe that life is hard? Or maybe we need to phrase what you're putting out there a little bit differently. Like, what will it take for life to have ease to it? And what will it take for me to succeed with ease and grace in the best ways for me? Or, in the ways that are for the highest good and things like that. And the other thing is you can utilize your awareness and energy awareness with all your choices. So you can sit with like, oh, what will it be like if I start a spiritual business and go that direction and get the energy of it? And like, does that feel light to you? Does that feel like the best choice to you? And then you can be like, okay, what will it be like if I get this type of a job? And like, what does that feel like? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel light? So you do have or can hone in the awareness and intuition to make the choices for you that are the words I'm hearing, which aren't exactly what I want to say, like are going to help you be free from making the choices that would bring you to being like a bum entrepreneur, something like that for a period of time, and would keep you from making the moves that are going to hurt you more than help you, I guess. And it will save you a lot of painful, unnecessary learning experiences if you're going based on your awareness and intuition instead of having to mentally try to like learn the lessons the hard way. A way I've heard it described is like when you work with your intuition, it's like moving around in the room with the lights turned on. When you're not coming from highest consciousness and intuition and your divine guidance, etc. It's like walking around in a room with the lights off. Like you might walk right to where you're trying to go and grab the object you're trying to look for, or you might bump into a bunch of furniture and break your toe on something and then trip over something and then life alert has to go off and you know save your behind, and then you're like, oh, why did I ever do this and make this choice, and what's the point? It's like, well, you if you'd hone in your intuition, you probably would have avoided that because you would have been walking in the room with the lights on, making probably more of the best possible choices for you in situations. So keep that in mind with all this and everything, I suppose. I really think a lot more people would be doing really well if they followed their awareness and their intuition instead of just their mind. You know what I'm saying? So I was really sitting with like, should I just go back and just get rid of that whole like 17 minutes I just recorded of this thing that wasn't what I originally planned on? And they're like, nope, this is what they needed. This is gold, at least hopefully for all of you tuning into this. But they're saying that's all things that should be there. So let's get to the rest of this episode, shall we? Honestly, the last thing we just talked about, like following your awareness and intuition, segues into this number one thing. But the first thing they wanted me to talk about, as far as things I've learned since doing this spiritual entrepreneur thing full time, is walk your own road, go your own way. And they really emphasize that this was so key for you guys, or just in general. And one thing that's also hitting me about that title is if you're doing that, you're going to stand out. You're not going to get lost in the noise so easily. And that's something they wanted me to add in. So I'll read to you what they would like me to say to you for starters, and then we'll flow with some of the other things. One, just don't blindly follow others. Don't blindly copy others. Don't copy and paste other business practices. Don't follow the crowd blindly. Trust your divine guidance and intuition on how you set things up. So, one thing they'd like me to talk about with this is it reminds me of this isn't like something I learned. I mean, I have some, well, there's some things I could talk about with my recent journey, but this is actually going way back to when I was in this rock band uh, in my early 20s. And it was supposed to be or aiming to be more business oriented. It wasn't just four dudes in a garage, doing a totally stereotypical thing with like partying and stuff. It really aimed to set up a business that brought in income and was successful. However, there was this one idea for marketing the bands, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. I just think this is a really good awareness or lesson or thing that I noticed. And one thing that one of the members would do, who was kind of the leader of the band, was he would really look up a lot of like the online marketing things and just certain marketing campaigns other companies did. And I just noticed there was a tendency to kind of sometimes copy and paste or attempts to copy and paste one campaign that worked for a completely different industry and try to like force it to work for music in the music industry. And it just didn't quite perfectly fit. Like there was a campaign that a brand called Harry's Razors did, which is for shaving, and they did this email campaign to launch. I think when they started out, they were doing this like subscription thing where you'd have your, your handle for the razor, and then they'd send out new razor heads every like month or something like that. I think it was a newer kind of model in that industry at the time. And the thing about an email campaign for that was pretty much like, hey, send this email out to a bunch of other people. And I think at the end, like they were going to away a prize to someone who was part of the email chain, or like the first number of people got a reward. I can't remember exactly what happens. However, the thing that I noticed was for the razors, there's a really specific value add. Like there's a certain demographic that's pretty large that's going to find that valuable and helpful to them. I guess any gender that uses razors. I think it was geared towards men though. And like people who might find that cool or convenient. So like the value add of like that email chain is really apparent to that demographic when it's sent out to their contacts, essentially that company's contacts. So I could see how it was pretty easy for it to catch fire because the value was right there. It was right in their face. It was something they could use. It was something that made their life better, more convenient, and it had a lot of utility for them. Now, trying to copy paste that and apply that to music, it's a little bit more difficult because it's not the same. Like the value the music brings to people is not a copy and paste of like the utility that a razor is going to bring people. So I think the way it came across more with an email campaign with the band is like, oh, we're trying to make it famous and really big. Please help us. As opposed to like, here's this big utility and value you're getting when you send this email on. Like it was kind of just like, oh, here's these songs. I hope you like them. And you can get this deal with the songs. It just wasn't the same. And maybe the reason I didn't speak up about it as much at the time is I'm still struggling to find the exact wording to convey what I'm trying to convey, where it just like doesn't fit. And I can totally I could just see how it doesn't fit, but it's hard to explain how it doesn't fit. But hopefully you're seeing how it doesn't fit as I try to explain this. Most of you are. I guess what I was trying to get across with that is like it's kind of difficult sometimes to just like see someone doing something and then try to make it fit when you aren't aware of the context around what they're doing that makes it work for them and makes it work for their business, if it even is, because there might be people who look successful with something they're doing on social media and they're not, and you don't realize that because there are people who like lie about their sales to make it look like they're really successful to try to get more sales, or lie about the money they're making or things like that. Not as much probably maybe in the spiritual, side of entrepreneurship, but in like not everyone's like this, just some of the people were like taught to do this and then they just kind of did it, it seems. And or like I said earlier, or it's working for them, but you don't have the context of why it's working for them and that particular audience and that particular business. So it's really important that you're not just doing what everyone else is doing and expecting it to work, but like really check in as like, does this feel right for me? Does this feel like it aligns with your audience? Well, I kind of switched the me's and the you's here. Does it really feel like it fits with the audience you're working with or trying to build? Does it fit with your integrity? Which is the other thing I could kind of talk about with this walk your own road, go your own way thing is there are a lot of like tactics and things that like marketing gurus will kind of throw your way, or business. There are really good business coaches out there, by the way, but certain business coaches that are just trying to make a really big following and, business online might put out there. And maybe there was a time and a place where it fits, but maybe it doesn't feel in alignment with you and your business and the relationship you'd like to have with your clientele and with your integrity. I think a common one could be if you're using really big fear-based marketing tactics where you're trying to like scare people into buying with you, or they'll never get a certain result, and something silly like that is one I commonly hear as an example. And there might even be things that are more subtle that the way I'm gonna try to say this is I think there are people who see some of these tactics and they kind of brainwash themselves into thinking it's okay because everyone else is doing it or because this person talking about it has a certain way of like pitching it where it kind of softens the edges of what's actually going on, if that makes sense with that tactic. And so I think you have to be careful of that and really energetically look at it and be like, does this feel aligned? Because usually what I've found is if I start to consider a tactic and it's not for the highest good or it's not aligned with me and my business, and I sit with it, it doesn't quite feel like something feels off. Something doesn't feel quite right when I go to um when I sit with incorporating it or I go to usually I'm just guided not to do it in the first place, but pay attention to that. Like, does it feel right to incorporate something or does something feel off when you go to put it in place or when you go to write a certain email or include something on a website or something like that? Especially if you heard it from a tactic from someone else and it just doesn't feel quite like it fits. And sometimes when you're doing something new, like charging for your work, for example, like that can be uncomfortable. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that growth edge of like feeling uncomfortable of doing something new, like charging for your work, which is kind of paramount to having a business that works in the first place. you know, it's more like maybe it'll feel kind of sleazy to you, or maybe it'll feel like you're manipulating in a way that doesn't feel really good to you. And it's just kind of important to catch that and be like, okay, what would be aligned? And is there a way to do this that feels right and is for the highest good that could get either the same results or better results, or just would be for the highest good? And in time, you'll get to the thing that will get the results in a way that is win win and for the highest good of all involved, of course. And one of the ways I've heard to talk about marketing, since we're on that, that can be helpful is like just look at it as communicating. That was like the line that was like ding dong, light bulb moment for me. It was like you're just communicating about something. And so you don't have to lie about it and you don't have to go super hard with convincing everyone it's the best thing in the world and everyone else sucks and you're the best or anything like that. You can just be honest, like, hey, here's this, here's what it does, here's what it's meant to do, here are the things people are saying about it. I invite you to try it if you feel like it's a fit for you or something like that. And just be honest about the results and all that. And another way I've heard it pitched is it was by Lee Harris, actually, who's pretty dang successful with spiritual business stuff. And he was like, he talks about talking about products he puts out is like he's really proud of something and he's just telling people about it. He's communicating about that. So in an honest way. So I would look at that as an alternative to trying to copy and paste the techniques that are out there. So number two here, it already kind of came through at the beginning, but it's like okay to pioneer and do things that no one else is doing yet. And just because no one else is doing it yet doesn't mean it won't be successful. And you might be the person who blazes the trail, and you might find a lot of people copying you in the future if it works for you. And especially if it feels aligned and in integrity and you're guided to do it, I would trust that and give it a shot because you might be surprised that you are the trendsetter if you go to pioneer something and it starts working. So the other thing I'll say here as a caveat to this walking your own road, go your own way, not just blindly copying others, is if you are divinely guided or intuitively guided to do something similar, like that's one thing. Like that, there's a reason for that. And sometimes there are just things out there that work, and multiple people are going to do them. Like, for example, it kind of makes sense if you have a newsletter, even if a lot of other people have a newsletter. Like, there's a reason people have newsletters. The thing that keeps coming to me as a analogy would be like, just because two painters happen to be working with paintbrushes and canvas doesn't mean that artist B is copying artist A. It's like that kind of just is the medium. That just kind of like is how that art world can work. And yes, there's other ways you can do watercolors on paper, you can do digital art, like there's all this other stuff too. So keep that in mind. But Sometimes you just kind of have the same tools to work with. So that overarching thing might be similar, but it doesn't mean you're copying. In some ways, it's once you get into the nitty gritty that it counts with some of this stuff. The other thing that with that, if you end up being guided to do something similar, is like you might not realize how it's going to evolve in the future or where that stepping stone is going to lead. So it might look really similar to someone else's right now, but then as it kind of transcends where you're at, as you evolve, as it evolves, it turns into something else entirely. So there might be a reason you're guided to do something that's similar to what someone else is doing or what a lot of people are doing, and that's okay. So really with number 1, it's don't be afraid to stand out and do things the way you're guided to do them, even if it's completely different. And maybe not. It might even take a little bit longer than other people who are just doing the normal thing, but you might be surprised how it works for you either right away or just in the long run compared to people who are just copying everyone else. And trust your intuition on all that. Of course, that's like a main thing. So the second thing, authenticity and being yourself and being genuine are just so key in my experience. And this is the number 2 thing they really wanted me to talk about here. And especially if you like your spiritual business is more like a personal brand thing where like you're selling yourself as a reader or you're selling energy healing sessions or things like that. Like it's important that you're being authentic and genuine because people are going to like you and the flavor you bring and what you bring to the table, which is different than everyone else. And it's going to be one of the things that help you stand out from other people. And the other thing is like there will be people who book with you just because they like you and like what you bring to the table. And of course, like there's that part where it's like, yeah, is what you do effective and like for the highest good and like getting results for people. That's a big percentage of it too. However, some of it can really boil down to like, do they like you as like a person? And so you being the authentic you and genuine you can really bring a flavor that's important to people. Another example, I'm going to borrow from Lee again here on this one because they had me write it down is, are you going to go to a facilitator, a practitioner of any variety, even like a salesman or like a retail employee to get help with something? Are you going to go do it with someone who is happy and you feel good around them and they're kind to you or, interact with you in a way that you prefer? Are you going to go to the person who's like cold and they say mean things about people all the time and they're really harsh towards you or they like yell at you? Like you're probably going to go to the person who is a bit more self-developed, a bit more evolved and a bit more kind and great to be around as long as they can still get you the results, of course. And same with you, like you showing up as yourself and showing who you are. It also just kind of gives people a taste of like what they're going to get if they book with you or if they work with you. And people getting a good feel for you and feeling comfortable with you. And it's don't do it in a manipulative way where like, yes, I'm going to build the trust with the people and make them comfortable for me, and then they will give me all of their money. It's like I think sometimes when certain people talk about it, it almost sounds a bit more like I'm going to manipulate people into trusting me, build trust with my audience. Like it sounds like a robot. Like time to build trust with audience. Beep beep boop boop. Insert trust phrase. Boop boop beep beep. Time to rake in. Wait, where is the cash? Where's the cash? But if you're authentically doing it, like it really is a tell, and people can tell, and people can feel the energy of it. And that's also part of what I'm trying to get to here is like, if you're showing up genuinely and just like as you, and you've authentically done the work to get to a really good place, and you authentically know what you're talking about, like people are going to love that. And you're going to find your crowd as opposed to wearing a mask and pissing a bunch of people off when it comes off or something like that. And once people get a feel for your MO and how you operate, like it makes the world of difference for them when they're trying to choose who to work with or find the right thing for them. The other thing that's a part of this, we kind of already touched on it, is like working on yourself and getting to a great place can be really a part of this. And like, I would definitely authentically do the work on yourself and get to a good place where you're really good at what you're doing and you know what you're talking about and you're an evolved person individually. it's probably going to attract a better clientele, honestly, in the first place. And it's going to make a huge difference. One thing that happens for me when I'm scrolling through TikTok or I'm on YouTube and I watch a reader or someone who's newer to me or I listen to a podcast even is I can instantly feel that person's energies. And like if I watch a reader and instantly one, if I get like a heavy or gross feeling, like it's an instant no. So like your energies and showing up authentically with getting to a good place can be helpful in that way. And also like sometimes they're just people show up and there's just a distinct lack of like potency in their energies. And to me, that's always suspicious. I'm like, how are you so lacking energetically? Yet supposedly, you can do this work. It like that's always a tell for me. Also, like sometimes you'll show up and just the person just feels really young energetically. And then they'll start talking and they'll be like, I'm 19 or, or something like that. Be like, okay, I don't know if I want life advice from a 19-year-old. Maybe a little bit of growing up would be helpful first. And I get like if it's intuitive or channeled, like, yes, you can bring through the accurate information that's helpful for someone older than you. You can be wise beyond your years, etc. At the same time, I do think there's something to be said. This is kind of a personal take, maybe, but I do think there's something to be said for like life experience in addition to that to round it out. An experience with doing your work for maybe a number of years too, where you've really put it to practice and put it to the test and like you know what you're doing and kind of have a bit more experience of dealing with certain situations or messages coming through where you can deliver the message in a way that lands or deliver the message in a way that has enough tact to it that the person can receive it and work with it tangibly in their life, if that makes sense. I so often have found myself listening to like a reading or something on YouTube and I kind of just get the energy of it. And like, why am I listening to this like 23-year-old about spirituality and life when I'm actually more connected than they are when I check in? That's what I get. And I can get my own channeled information from source. And they just clearly are not coming from as experienced of a place as me with all this. I've kind of turned off a lot of YouTube videos because of that, and so that's why I'm recommending like, are you like authentically there as a part of this authentically being yourself and getting yourself to a place that can really lend itself to people realizing you're there. So I guess I'll say it one more time. One thing I've always felt kind of compelled to say and that just really hit me as I've shown up and facilitated videos, readings online. It's just like who you are matters. So showing up as you, authentically doing the work on you to show up as to be able to show up as you authentically and to have an impact through that. And just the example that sets of you being fully you and genuinely you is huge, even just energetically. And it just gives more people permission to be themselves and do their own thing, which actually going back to number one, you pioneering and doing things in your own way that you're guided to that might be unique or different, that also gives other people permission to step away from the crowd and shine if they're meant to. So you might be having a big impact just through showing up as yourself, in addition to the direct work you might be facilitating or doing through channeling or readings or energy healing or whatever else you're doing, when you show up and talk about this stuff. So number three, we actually kind of already delved into it, though it's kind of a slightly different flavor or angle of it. So number three is have authentic experience in the field you're working with and or teaching in. I realize this really goes without saying, and they even put down the words, it goes without saying underneath this. However, it really makes a difference if you know what the heck you're actually talking about when you show up and facilitate your work. Like it's going to show in your energies and it's going to show in like the advice you're giving people actually being effective. There are plenty of people I've listened to and maybe they're good at like delivering an accurate message in a reading. But the second they start talking about something that's like outside of that, like maybe they start talking about chakras or they start talking about how they think the universe works or how they think energy works or how they think manifestation works, and maybe they're just plagiarizing it from somewhere else, or maybe they're just pulling it out their butt sometimes and it's just like way off, and like my spirit guides would be like, yeah, that's not how that works, and my intuition would be like, nope, and my body pendulum goes nope the second it comes out of their mouth. And so why are they talking about something they don't know anything about? I'm not sure. But it always stands out to me and instantly turns me off from booking with them. I mean, my spirit guides would be like, no, don't book with them anyways, even if I didn't notice that. But it's always to me been a turn off. So I highly encourage you to actually have practice in the thing you're going into business for. For example, like if you're trying to be a Reiki teacher or facilitate Reiki sessions, like maybe it's a good idea to do like 50 practice sessions before you're like, okay, I'm going to do this professionally, or do so, at least like a certain number and know you're having an effect and know you're good. And then do a certain number by donation to kind of start get comfortable charging money, but it's still less of a risk for the person or the people who are booking with you. And then as you get really comfortable, like, no, this is good, I'm getting accurate information for them, it's really helping them, it's really showing, then you could be like, okay, I'm going to start charging money. That could be a better way to go than just like diving in full bore because you're trying to quit a certain job and you have to do it right now and like putting all this pressure on it and coming from this really intense place and shoving all your clients away, because you're trying to force it all to happen and you're not even in the place for it yet. So this is probably going to be a shorter one, honestly. It's really saying like, be good at what you do. Don't just start a business because you have a camera on a deck of cards is a phrase that kind of keeps coming to me, or that I've kind of been wanting to put out there. Cause it's one thing if you're just trying to get practice and you're trying to get better. And I totally understand that. But if you don't know that you can get results for people, like why are you doing it? Like, are you really doing it for the right reasons? So for whatever reason, this is something that occurred to me. And I guess like the other reason that this kind of showed up for this is I remember I had a client, this was years ago, in a reading I was facilitating, and she was talking about how when she would scroll through like TikTok and see people delivering readings and messages, she'd be like, yeah, it kind of seems like a lot of those people, like they give readings and stuff, but they kind of don't seem like they've had a lot of actual experience with like actual spiritual endeavors or spiritual experiences or, working with spirituality. But like when she was talking to me, she was saying I was coming across like I actually did. And the reason for that is because I actually did. Like there was no great mystery because of the years I really hardcore dedicated to channeling, energy healing, spirituality, and like all this. Like I went hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. I went hard for years before things really ramped up and things really took off. And thank God I'm really glad that I'm someone who shows up and I actually have some semblance of knowing what I'm talking about. Well, my guys are saying it's beyond just some semblance, but I have actual experiences to go back to, and I'm not just really regurgitating something I've heard before. And I got to the place I could trust my channeling and intuition at least to a pretty good extent before I was really putting myself out there, for the most part, at least. So it really pays to have experience and to gather experience before you're doing something professionally. I realize the field isn't regulated. I think in some ways, with the way the world is, with just where people are with all this stuff, that's not necessarily a bad thing. At the same time, that kind of shows you that you have to trust yourself when it comes to who to book with. And I guarantee having authentic experience under your belt is going to draw people to you. And just knowing you can get people results is going to bring you a lot more confidence if you're putting yourself out there. And just knowing you can do it really helps. So I'm just going to leave it there. So I guess if you're looking into this, like what can you do to gather experience? Is it like if you're trying to give readings, is it giving readings to friends and like seeing like, oh, is it accurate? And doing a certain number before you start asking for donations. So it's low risk for people and you can get more experience. And then as you know you're really good and you're going to get results for people if they book, like you can start charging more and you'll feel more confident doing it because you've built up that experience and that competence and that, you've shown you can do it to yourself and to others. And can you go on your journey? I know I'm going to say that again. Not borrowing from episode 2, it kind of just has the same thing that is important. Like going on your journey and authentically having the experience with things before you're trying to sell people something in a certain field. Do you have experience with manifestation? Like a lot of it. Do you have like Are you at a high level with it where things are just showing up every day? Like you just ask for something, it shows up, and you have a good idea of how it works because you're always doing it and you're seeing it in action all the time. Like, do you have experience with energy healing where you've actually worked with balancing chakras so that you don't sound like you have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about chakras? you know? So just what can you do to start to gather experience if this is something you're really interested in? So number 4 here, I feel like the way I kind of approached this, I started to talk about things before it was really their segments. Number 4 is like sometimes the thing you think is going to work isn't the optimal route. And following and trusting your intuition is way more powerful and effective. So something might look really good on paper for like bringing in money for the business and spirit, your spirit guides, the angel source, your intuition might be like, no, wait, don't do that. And like you have this thing over on this other total other spectrum that's really flowing and working, and they're really angling you to work towards that. Like I would trust your intuition because that thing that's flowing and working and they're aiming you towards might be the thing that actually brings in, money long term, or like the results or effects you're trying to have long term, even if it doesn't look like the thing on paper that is going to be the thing that works. So it's really with the spiritual business, I guess with any business, but with this here, it's like trusting yourself and your intuition over sometimes, the logical mind. And it can be important to work with both and work with both in a balanced way that makes sense and works for you and gets you results. It's just like no matter how good the idea is on paper, if it's not the right thing, if it's not the right fit, and if it's not going to work and Source knows that and Source is telling you that, you should probably listen. And it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It For some of those things, it might just be like it's not the right time, So sometimes before you enact things, it's a good idea to ask like, is now the time to enact this? Like, is now the time for this project? I'm kind of borrowing from a book called Right Riches for You by Dr. Dane here and Gary Douglas. And one of the neat tricks they talk about is like, if you have a project, you ask it like the consciousness of that project, like, is now the time for you to go out into the world or for me to work on you? And if it says nope, then you're ahead of your time with it. It's not going to be, it might not work for like a year or 2 years or 20 years. So you just come ask it to tell you when it is the time. And then if something says it is the time, then like, okay, that's probably a good idea to work on it. As long as you're also getting like, yeah, it's for the highest good. And that's what the angels are guiding you to do, etc. So you can work with your different facets of your intuition with all that. So we're going to move to number 5. This is one they just channeled through. Working on yourself equals working on your business. It's going to directly impact the people you bring in and attract. It's going to directly impact how people perceive you. It's going to directly impact your results. And sometimes even in really indirect ways. Like there are stories I've heard where it's like people are hung up on business, and then someone, the facilitator tells them, well, you should actually work on like doing something you enjoy and work on this, move towards doing this new thing in your life over here. That's this hobby that brings you joy. And then they do that. And then their business starts working, even though it had nothing to do, it seemed directly with their business. Something about changing them and their energies and their life had a direct impact on the way their business started to work and turn out. So I guess one of the questions, if you already do business and you're jammed up on it, is like, what else can you work on for yourself and your life? Another example I personally have is it was actually more about like the income portion of my business. And it was something I was really focused on like manifesting. And so I had a Reiki session from my girlfriend actually. And one of the things that came through when she facilitated the session was like, hey, like it kind of like you're really focused on like bringing this in and like manifesting this and improving this aspect, and that's all great and all. However, pretty much what she was getting was like, if you go and like work on your body and like exercise and start moving your body more, all that's going to land more and start to come in and work. And lo and behold, that's pretty much what happened. So I think sometimes we think we can neglect an area because, again, kind of like we just talked about, like we think that's going to be the thing that makes things work. But we actually need to look at it holistically and ask, like, what do we need? What does our business need? And follow our intuition with that instead of just, and even like my girlfriend delivering that message for me, like that's the universe working through her to get me a message to help me. So that's something to pay attention to. especially for those of you listening, if it's compounded with other synchronicities or other messages you get, or someone tells you something and your guys are instantly like, yeah, you should listen to that, then you know you should probably really you should probably put it in place, you know? So don't neglect working on yourself when it comes to increasing things with a spiritual business or a business in general. Like it really could make things click or open up new avenues where things start working for you. And that really ties into number 6, actually, which is self care is key. Self care just helps you to show up better. And it's so integral to like everything going well. And it's something I didn't do as well with starting out with the spiritual business. And yeah, I could say in some ways it was tough because I was moving from like working nights at a place. And while I was working nights, I was also doing like readings for people. So I'd like get off of a night shift and then do readings, like 2 to 4 readings for people, and then I'd go to bed, and, like, that's all I'd have time for. Like, I didn't really have time to cook or anything. I pretty much was just doing what I could for food and just making it work, and eventually, like, things kinda worked out where the readings were consistent and picked up enough. I'm like, "Okay, I got the message I couldn't do both, and so I picked the readings, and there were signs kinda leading me that way, so that's what I did." And so I ended up switching to just doing readings full time after all that, and after doing this business full time for a few years now, like the long term is so key. Taking care of yourself so it's sustainable is so key. Like I've definitely kind of burnt myself out at certain periods along the journey, which made it really difficult to persevere through certain things or feel like I could keep going through certain things. And it's so not fun when you get to a place where you feel like you can't do the work that you need to do in order to bring in money. Like it turns into a mess. So if something shows itself to you that it's like not working, you have to pay attention and adjust things so that it is working for you and the business, you know, and your customers and source, and not just like just the business, or it's just you like a zombie plugging away trying to put energy into forcing something to succeed and you're not taking care of yourself and fueling yourself. Like your work will get so much better if you show up and take care of yourself. You're the probably I don't want to limit you, but it'll probably help you with getting better results with your clients. And you'll probably have more clarity with what you're doing and working on as well if you're in a good place while you're showing up and like shifting things in your business, or paying attention to all that instead of trying to just like zombie your way through or sprint your way through to a certain end target. Like it kind of helps to relax and relax your way through it. And again, follow your intuition and make sure you're in a good place nutritionally, physical exercise wise, sleep wise, really big. And it just sucks so much when something falls apart because you're not in a good place for it because you didn't take care of yourself. So really, really, really important just for the sustainability of it, because maybe you can get away with it for 6 months, a year, depending on how young you are, like maybe 2, not to limit you regarding your age or anything like that. It's just like you probably want this to be sustainable if you want it to be successful long term, of course. So definitely remember taking care of yourself in the journey so that it's something that's enjoyable to you and not a chore, you know, at the end of the day. So those were the 6 things that came through ahead of time for this. I am getting not to do a full channel mode session for this particular episode, and I'll probably be back facilitating a full channel mode session for next week's episode. I am going to sit with my spirit guides, the angels and source and intuition for a second and just see if there's anything else that would be for the highest good for me to bring through or flow with before we wrap it up totally here, though. I know my voice, I'm not sure what it is. The second I go to like record, like my voice and throat just turn into the freaking Gobi Desert or something. Like, like I'll be totally good, and then I'll just sit down, like, all right, time to record a podcast. And I'll just instantly feel the moisture evaporating from my throat, and just whatever's up with that. But let me see what they'd like to get to here with all this. So let's kind of recap some of the things because they're kind of showing me again, like going your own road, like going your own route, forging your own path is just so key for this crowd because you have unique gifts, you have unique things that are going to impact the world in different ways. And if someone's already doing something and you're trying to like copy that or be the B version of that thing, one, you're not going to stand out as much. Two, the world already has that thing. So if you're just trying to like directly copy someone's thing or like method, like again, if you're divinely guided to do something really similar to someone else, that's one thing. But you might be called to something different that is more you and resonates with your audience or your future audience that you're building towards more if you're going your own way and trusting yourself. The other thing I'm getting to say is like the world really needs new. The world, what I'm hearing is not what I want to say or what I'd like to be the case. It's just what I'm hearing is like the world does have a lot of things that just don't work. They aren't as healing for people as they could be. They're not as there as they could be. And there are a lot of people who are doing things for the wrong reasons. And I'm getting to recommend that you don't be one of them at all. And, it's fine if something benefits you as long as it's win-win and for the highest good, you're divinely guided to do it, etc. It really doesn't make sense to do something if there's not some sort of benefit for you on a certain level. Like there has to be some semblance of receiving for something to be balanced and flowing like a business. If like a business doesn't have money coming in, it can't really be a business, so to speak. Like it's gonna crash or you're gonna run out of money and food and die. Like then the business is gone. Like it doesn't make sense to not have something that's win-win and sustainable and for the highest good. You kind of get it. I know that's a more extreme example, but I think it gets the point across. And that's not that doesn't mean like you make it your sole mission just to make money. It's just you kind of have to look at the gifting and receiving nature of the relationship you're crafting with people, I guess, with what you're building in the world. Has to be some form of sustainable or self-sustainable or something. Next thing they'd like to say here is, just for whoever's still listening, whoever's tuned into this, it's worth it to go all in on yourself when you get the message to do so. I wouldn't do that prematurely if you're not sure or haven't got that intuitive message. It's just what I'm hearing to say. Like you're worth betting on yourself, and you're also worth investing in yourself and giving yourself the skills you need to succeed and create an income with business or something, etc. So please don't avoid going all in on yourself, especially when it's shown to you that you're good enough and you get results. And again, you're guided to do it. You're worth it. And let me see what else I'd like to bring through here that we're flowing with. The other thing for this crowd that I'm getting is like this crowd needs to not give up, not give up at the first obstacle, not give up, just because something doesn't work right away or the next day. Sorry, the Gobi Desert's rising metaphorically. It's a joke. Don't worry about that. Cancelly clear for anyone who's like, oh, what did he put out there to the universe? So anyways, sometimes things are stepping stones to the thing that's going to succeed for you. Sometimes things are just training you. They're like the training wheels that are getting you to the endeavor that is going to take off, or they're training you for a future career that Source has for you or for someone you're going to help or a group of people you're going to help. So don't discount what you're gaining from things, I guess you could say, even if something like doesn't work right away. Now they're giving me like quotes that to me seem a little bit cliche, but they're showing me the Michael Jordan, that quote that is often, put up on posters in classrooms and stuff where you miss 100% of the shots you don't take kind of a deal. I guess in some ways that's kind of what they're talking about. if you give up just because there's one obstacle, like, you're not taking the shot. It's one thing if you're redirecting or you get the message or that spirit's just redirecting you to a different path. That's not giving up. That's just being flexible. And I guess you could say it's like doing your research and seeing what works and being willing to try different things, try new things until something clicks. That's not necessarily giving up. That's just adjusting or pivoting. However, you may not realize what something's giving you, so don't just give up. So I'm getting that's it. Again, not going to do a full channel mode session this go around, but I'll probably have one in the next episode. So I hope this helped you, gave you something to munch on that's going to percolate into something really good for you or something that's gold for you or that just helps you to move in the best directions for you and your life. And I'm definitely not trying to scare you away from a spiritual business or anything like that if that's really what you feel called to at all. Like if you're meant to do it, do it. Like that's absolutely like if you're meant to do it, then it's probably 100% one of the best things you can do when it's the right time for you. So trust that. The other thing I was going to say is there probably is something that's for you. Even if something happens where you go down a particular road or this road and it doesn't work out or it doesn't get you all the way, you probably gained something from it. There probably is something that is for you that will bring you joy and the things you're looking for and looking to bring in. And honestly, I wish you whatever the right answer is for you. And what I mean by that is the optimal thing, the correct thing that's meant for you, that's going to bring you the best life possible for you and something that ticks the boxes for you, if you will. It's kind of maybe the total package for you, whether it's in this field or it's something else or some combination of things or it's something no one's ever seen or heard of before, whatever it is, I'm totally wishing you well. And I'm wishing you the best path towards what you're meant to do and be and facilitate and experience here. Okay. So, wishing you well. I will talk to you in the future. Hope you liked this episode. And if you would like to check out more from me, you can also go to my website, brandonhbloom.com, of course.